If you're here and you're watching this, you probably learned the most basic Republican things you could. The country club Republican. That, oh yeah, we don't do illegal immigration, fiscal responsibility, making sure we, talk things out. We allow some things. The Reaganomics people. You learned it in school. I mean, they teach it pretty hard. And you're probably saying, why is this guy so extreme now? How did he go from country club type Republican to staunch Christian nationalist? Extremist, you might say. We're going to break it down because you need to understand it. I'm going to give you my personal story as to how I became a Christian nationalist, how I became this crazy anti-Semitic, extremist, racist bigot that everyone likes to call me nowadays, because it's important. And you need to see and understand what Christian nationalism is and why it's good for America. I'm Jarrod Wright. This is the Right Wing. Make sure you hit the buttons down below, like, subscribe, all of them, and let's get into it. Now, growing up, I, like many of you, were what you'd call country club Republicans. No, I didn't have a country club membership. That's what you're taught. You're taught Reaganomics throughout school. You're taught this, basic conservatism, this, maybe a little bit of patriotism in there that was like, hey, this is a good thing. You learn some cool things from it. And you get this basic of ideas, this basis of what you should be doing. And you start to run with it and you think that it's right. And then throughout time, I said, wait a second, this isn't working. Mainstream conservatism is falling apart. It's ruining our country. It's soft. And I said, what else is there? And it wasn't just a snap change like that. That's not at all what happened. It was a, gradual change to which I found where I'm at today as a far right-wing Christian nationalist. And I'm going to break it down for you because I want you to see what I saw. Now, if I really had to take this back, I would say this goes all the way back to like 2015. Now, what was cool about my time in high school was in 2015, I was 15, right? I am learning about politics. I am developing my viewpoints there as a 15-year-old while the Trump elections are going on, when Trump declares that he's running. So I went through high school learning about, real politics at the point in time in which like the craziest modern political thing ever happened, which was the original MAGA movement. This was Trump. He was running in 2015. He obviously won in 2016. And let me tell you something. I was hated for supporting Trump in 2016, right? My school was made up of about 50 to 60% Hispanics, many of them illegal, many of them whose parents came here illegally. So when you take a stance, for Trump and against especially illegal immigration, then people don't like you very much. And I kind of rode with that. Like, I thought it was funny. I don't really care to be the bad guy. So I went with it. And I'm like, hey, Trump, let's go. And I would still stand with Trump. 2016 Trump, I would stand with him today, believe it or not. I really would. I think that was a good movement. But then as time shifts, as time goes on, you see what Trump falls into. I'm sure that you were taught Reaganomics, the trickle-down method, cut taxes for everybody, let it trickle down to the people at the bottom tier. Over time, you're going to realize these things maybe didn't work. I started seeing graphs. I started reading, especially about finances and about financials. I started seeing where our economy was headed overall, what the root cause of it was. And I began to get extreme, you might say, right? I began to realize things that were different. And a thought that kept crossing my head was, as a Christian man, if my priority, first and foremost, always is my faith, is believing in God and believing in his principles that he set forth, why would I not allow that to become an identity within political opinions? Why shouldn't my faith shape my politics? And this is not against the Constitution. As I began reading and seeing things, I said, well, wait a second. They wrote freedom of religion, but what did they mean? They meant a freedom to practice Christianity. And there's this idea of separation of church and state, but what was the basis of it? And the basis of it was we need to keep the state out of the church because it's inherently possible to keep the church out of the state. It influences our everyday decisions. Their worry was that it would become corrupt like, you could say Rome did whenever the government overtook the church and ran it and instituted their power through the church. But whenever the church institutes their power through the government, it can become a beautiful, well-structured, theologically based constitutional monarchy, you could say, Christian monarchy. It becomes wonderful. It becomes a good thing. And that's not saying I necessarily want a monarchy, but in terms of there is one king above all else, that's the monarchy I want. That's what I go for. And I began to have these thoughts, and I said, wait, that makes way more sense. Why would I not want good Christian morals in my nation? Wait a second. I've always stood against homosexuality and abortion. Why would I not want those values represented, those faith values, because those are quite religious in its nature? Why would I want that pushed on my government? That seems like a good idea. And so the first thought process was, well, as an individual, we make our opinions this way. We allow our religion to influence our politics. And so that was my first thing as an individual, as a voter. I said, but the politicians have to see, other things. And then I began thinking more about what's going on in the nation. I watched the demise of this nation. I watch it literally crumbling. Like the last decade has been crumbling. It's been bad, right? For those of you who were maybe alive the decade before that, you saw some pretty darn good times. For me, I've watched it just fall and get worse and worse and worse. And I said, man, the issues that I see in this nation, if we just backed Christian principles, we probably wouldn't have them. Why don't we do that? Homosexuality is running rampant. Transgenderism gets worse and worse and worse. What started as, let us do what we want in our homes, has now become, let us make our kids transition because we believe that they're not what they were born as. So we're going to force them and feed them all kinds of chemicals and terrible things for the body and hormones and turn them into a girl when they were born a man. Who came up with that idea? This started as, we just want to do what we want behind closed doors, and now it's running pride parades in every city and putting rainbows everywhere, disgusting 6-colored rainbows, not God's rainbow of 7 colors, the symbol of hope. I said, man, this isn't good. We're killing more babies than you can even imagine when it comes to abortion. Babies are dying left and right, and I 100% believe this is demon worship. It is models that of worshiping Moloch and Baal in the Old Testament, of child sacrifice and orgies. This is what this is built off of, Planned Parenthood. I believe that this nation cannot survive without Christian principles. Christian principles are the reason that we are here, right? This nation was founded on Christian principles. Why do we not continue that? Why do we allow the minority to outrule the majority? I began to realize these things. I'm thinking out loud the thoughts that I thought, right? As I sat there and I said, what's going on? So I began to get more extreme and more extreme and more extreme. And, if you can call it that, these are normal beliefs, by the way. It's extreme by modern standards. It's completely normal by history standards. And then I say, well, what about this word conservatism? I'm a conservative. That's what I would say. I was a conservative. I didn't necessarily say Republican after I got going, because a lot of the things the Republican Party does, I don't support. And I said, what does being a conservative mean? To conserve, someone who conserves. What are we conserving? And I started looking at things. I'm thinking, so what are we conserving? What policies are there that we're conserving? All that we're conserving is liberal policies from 20 years ago. Even Hillary Clinton in 2008 was against gay marriage, was against any illegal immigration. She was against, if I'm not mistaken, even abortion at that point. A liberal. I mean, I'm talking about this is the worst of the worst if you really think about it. Hillary Clinton, but she would have been more conservative than most Republicans are today. We're only conserving liberal ideologies from 20 years ago. And I said, that's not who I am. No. We need to pack it up further than that if we're going to go to conserving. And I began realizing there's nothing left to conserve. There's nothing left. What, the Second Amendment? That's it. Even if you look at Trump today, Trump's policies today are, he's allowing abortion. He's not making a ruling on it. He's allowing transgender surgeries, right? He's allowing immigrants to flow into the nation like you wouldn't believe. H-1Bs come here like in insane numbers. He's increasing them, giving them more options, flooding our nation with people who are not American and whose culture does not mix with ours. We're going to get into that more. I began saying, whoa, wait a second. The only thing we have is a Second Amendment. And like I've said in other videos, there's like an 80% chance you support the Second Amendment as anybody in the United States, conservative or liberal at this point. And you say, this is insane. What is there to conserve? We need to restore. I'm a restorationist, you could say. I said, well, that's a different term. I kind of like that. That doesn't really fit the normal bill of Republican. I'm certainly not a Democrat. I certainly don't believe in these liberal ideologies, but restorationist, that's a cool term. A restorationist who bases his political beliefs on Christian values and who loves this nation dearly. I mean, dearly. I love this nation. Not more than God, not more than my wife or my family, but I love this nation quite a large amount. I said, wait a second, Christian nationalist. Oh, that's what that is. Christian nationalist. I put this nation first, but I put God above all else, first and foremost. Christian nationalist. That makes total sense. Why didn't I think of that? And you say, why is there a negative connotation to that? They label people like Pete Hegseth, the Christian nationalist. I'm thinking, no, he's not. No, he's not. He might be Christian. We'll give him the benefit of the doubt, but he's certainly not a nationalist. He's all about Israel's war. Matter of fact, he was campaigning against Thomas Massey. The Secretary of War, by the way, made no sense whatsoever. That's not a nationalist, but you're putting Israel's interest above your own nation's interest. That doesn't mean you're a nationalist at all. Why is nationalism bad? Wait a second. Why are we teaching that nationalism is bad, that loving your nation is bad? That all goes back to one person in Germany back in the 30s and 40s. Why is loving one's nation so bad? And I began thinking about these. And around this time, I began waking up to the Israel question, first and foremost, when these thoughts are going through my head. And I realized, wait a second, we've got this thing all wrong. Christian nationalism is the only way to save this nation. I want a Christian ruler. I want a nationalist nation where we teach loving God first and loving the nation second, but loving it nonetheless. This sounds incredible. And you begin looking at, the basics of Christian nationalism. It's strong Christian beliefs. It's, anti-abortion, anti-homosexuality, anti-transgenderism, pro-gun, pro-going to church, right? And you say, what about other things? Some Christian nationalists, we can differ when it comes to some policies. Now, this is definitely more right-wing of standard Republicans, or your country club conservative, like I called it, we're country club Republican. I personally believe in limiting large corporations. I don't want to see crazy tax cuts for them. We need to put hard limits on them because their greed will lead to corruption. It leads to bad things happening. You look at what's in the food supply. You look at the bad things going on there. I want to see some actual legislation blocking them. I want them to not be so powerful. I want to empower the farmers, the small town farmers. I want to empower the small business. I don't want the large corporations making money hand over foot to get upset, because if they can make 1 penny on 1 billion sales, they just made a whole lot of money. But your small town farmer, he's not going to charge you an extra penny just for the hell of it, because he may only sell 100 things that week. What does that come out to, $1? He'd rather actually have your good business. He would rather have his good word and his good product than that extra $1 a week. That's the difference. I want to push small businesses. I want to keep guns around, right? I want to make sure that our population is growing, and I want to make sure that our population is what it was originally meant to be, what our culture was built around, which is ultimately Western European white Christians. This isn't to say that I hate all other races. This isn't to say that I hate black people. This is to say that this is a Christian white culture. That's what it was built on. This is what we were built on for 200 years up into the 60s when the Hart-Celler Act was passed. And now all of a sudden we have people flocking here. We're bringing in H-1Bs who are inherently overall not as smart as Americans, but because they will take a 20 to 30% pay cut and the companies will get paid to hire them, guess who gets hired? Them before the Americans who went to school. You wonder why things cost so much whenever you bring in millions of people who shouldn't be here? Housing goes up, food goes up, because demand is going up and supply isn't there. The supply is going down at that point. So I said, we need strong borders for everybody. We don't need anybody immigrating here right now, especially from these other nations, especially from Somalia and from India and from China, right? People want to, bitch and whine about the issue with Mexico. But the issue is, like, these guys are ultimately Western European, most of them from Spain in some capacity. That's where their ancestors are from. And they work harder than anybody here. Yes, I don't want them here illegally, but when it comes to legal immigration, honestly, if we're going to allow people in, I would rather have most of the Mexicans that have come in than any other culture or group of people. They're the most similar to our culture, and they work very hard. Now, that being said, I want to close down the border entirely. First off, 100 million of you that are here and you shouldn't be here, get the hell out of this nation. Kick them out. Staunch ICE work, right? I'm talking not this weird Israel version of ICE or whatever, that's trained with Mossad and all that crap. I'm talking about hardcore, get them out. No questions. The whole family. All of them, right? I don't believe in birthright citizenship. Just because you have 2 Mexican parents and you got pregnant and you came across the border and the next day she has a baby doesn't mean that's a citizen. That's not what it was meant to be. right? That was never the intentions. Go look at the original planning of the first 30 years of this nation. You won't find that anywhere. That's not what birthright citizenship was for. I want people who are going to also integrate into this culture if you're going to come here. If we open up the borders, say in 20 years, we've gotten all these people out, we've decreased the amount of people, we're producing kids that are inherently American and pushing, especially our white American women, to actually have children, getting healthy so they can have children, and not the 1.3 children per woman that we have right now. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 kids per healthy woman. And then we decide, hey, let's let a few people in. Okay? You're going to integrate. You're going to accept our culture. You're not going to bring your culture in. You're going to accept this American culture as what it is, and you're going to conform to it. Otherwise, you're not going to be allowed here. And we're going to send you right back. That's my belief. That's what we should be doing. I'm not against immigration all in all, but right now, I am. We have to shut down the border. We have to get the people who shouldn't be here out. That's part of Christian nationalism. And you may ask, well, why is that? God instituted nations. And God understands that cultures don't mix well. You take this all the way back to the Tower of Babel. What happened? All the people came around. And what's the first thing they did when all the different cultures of the world got together? They said, let's build a tower so high that we can just reach the heavens because we're that good. And God said, nope, this has gotten out of control. We're not doing it. And he separated them, and they no longer spoke the same language. He separated the people when he instituted nations. The Old Testament nation of Israel, what did he command of them? He said, do not interbreed with the other nations, because their pagan rituals will come into your nation at that point. What do we see in America? We see pagan rituals. We're letting all these freaking Hindus in. Guess what? They're bringing in their demonic pagan gods. Little g gods, by the way. The Somalians, the same thing. The Indians, the same thing. I don't want to even have their little poop smearing, smelling, rubbing little g god anywhere near this nation. I don't want that pagan worship here. I don't want that demonic presence here. This is a Christian nation. Keep it over there in India. If you want to smear poop all over yourself, do it in India. Don't bring it here. If you want to build a Hindu temple, do it in India or do it in wherever. Don't bring it here. We don't need that. We need to establish a safe place here for our children. And that's also part of this. God commanded us to leave an inheritance for our children. Part of an inheritance is a safe nation to grow up in and to live out Christian principles in. And right now you go to schools and you have little Muslims and Hindu children running around everywhere. And obviously those children can't help it, but their parents are instituting that, and it's not safe for our children. That's not an inheritance leaving them. You're screwing them. You're making it so they're the minority in this nation. That's not good. That's not an inheritance. That goes against God's commandment. We need to create a strong border system where this nation is Christian. They're going to learn Christian principles. They're going to grow up in a Christian nation to be strong Christians, right? If you just hand them a bunch of steak in elementary school, and they never have milk to grow up spiritually, they're going to be in bad shape. They're going to choke on that steak, and that's what we're doing to our children. And once we institute that, now we can go out to other nations and spread the word of God and pray that it comes to them there in their nation. You can be a Christian in India. You don't have to be an Indian Christian in America. You can go be a Christian in India. I'll bring the word to you. But we have to have a nation here that is safe. And Christianity is inherently safe. That's important. That's why strong borders are important. This has been all throughout the Bible. God talks about nations. And the number one thing people say is, well, God says his kingdom is not here on earth, but rather up in heaven. I agree, but he's talking about heaven. He's talking about eternity. We're talking about here on earth and what is good, right? I'm not saying that this is heaven, that this is God's kingdom, right? When people say this, you obviously know they don't read their Bible and they're not Christians. They're honestly just retarded in the moment, right? They don't understand. They don't know. I'm not speaking about an eternity. I'm speaking about right now, right? We need strong borders. We need a Christian nationalist government. These are the thoughts that go through my head. I'm thinking, what would be wrong? Let me ask you this. You serve a Christian God, the Christian God, not a. I shouldn't have said that. You serve the Christian God, the Most High, the Holy of Holies. Do you think that he's okay with you sitting back and letting a bunch of Islamic, Muslim, whatever you want to call it, Hindus, Buddhists, build temples right down the street from you? Do you think that he's okay with that? Honestly, think about God from the Bible. If Peter and Paul were walking down the street and a pagan temple was going up and they didn't call them out on it and say, no, we're not doing this, do you think God would have been happy or upset? What do you think would be happening? Do you think God would say, no, we should just let them worship as they choose. It's okay. No, that's the dumbest idea I've ever heard in my life. Globalist agenda bullcrap's what that is. I do not believe in that. I do not ever want to hear that from your mouth. Judeo-Christian values, that was never said in the Bible. Let me tell you that one. Never say that one out of your mouth unless you're absolutely smashing it and saying, screw this thing. I believe in that. Like these are things that are important that we must understand. And this is where Christian nationalism comes from. It's like, no, we need Christian principles. We need a Christian nation. I'm not saying that if you're, currently a Muslim in the United States, I'm going to kill you or throw you out. That would be Sharia law, right? Perhaps we should get rid of you depending on your status, but I want to share the gospel with you. I do believe that certain things, privileges, may be revoked, such as I don't believe you should be able to serve in Congress if you are not a actual practicing Christian. This is something that 9 out of the 13 original states actually had within their own constitutions. You had to be a practicing Christian. So it's not like this is some odd belief. This is why it was a Christian nation to begin with. I don't think we should kill you. I don't think we should make you pay some sort of crazy amount of tax, but you're going to have to live by Christian principles here. And what's sad is I know more Muslims who are okay with this than Christians right now, honest to God. They're like, yeah, I would love to live in a Christian nation. I have no problem with that. Now, it's not saying I want a bunch of Muslims here. I don't. I think that Muslims are also a problem. Now, there's many Muslims I've made friends with, I've shared the gospel with, that are wonderful people. And I can have conversations with them. We don't hate each other because that's not what God intended. God didn't intend for you to just hate everyone that doesn't speak like you or have the same background as you. But you can tell them they're wrong. And I do that. And I think you should do that. That's important. That's one of the things that's important to address is what is Christian nationalism not? It's not killing a bunch of people, right? It's not just running around killing them because they don't speak like you, worship like you, but it is sharing the gospel with them and telling me, you're not going to do that here. You're not going to build your temple here. That doesn't please my God. If you want to build your temple, you can go elsewhere and do it. But right now you're not doing that here. It's not happening. Is this a bad thing? Does this upset anybody? Raise your hand if you're a Christian and you think that Muslims should be able to build temples here. That's retarded. Maybe you're not a very good Christian. Maybe you should read your Bible more. That's what I have to say to you. Just being honest. Like, it doesn't make any sense. So these thought processes are why I became a Christian nationalist. This is what I was thinking. And on top of this, fitness plays a major role in this. It is hard to be a strong, manly man, strong Christian nationalist man, if you're not going to be physically in shape. You should be working out. You should be able to run. You should be able to lift weights. You should look good, right? I mean, I don't know if you can see. I've been working out, I'm getting those. I'm part of the 1,000-pound club. I'm pretty proud of that. I'm sub 200 pounds, part of the 1,000-pound club. That's a big deal. You should be doing those things. I started out as, what you could say, weak, skinny little kid. And now I'm, a strong, 6 foot tall man, you could call it. That's part of it. Maybe that's part of my extremism and my rampant testosterone. I don't know. Growing a beard, is that inherently Christian nationalist? Listen, I want you to be a Christian nationalist. If you have questions, message me. Honestly, I answer on most things. You ask me a legitimate question. I want you to be a Christian nationalist. I want you to be healthy. I want you to love this nation. I want you to have good morals. I want you to be a good Christian man, right? That's part of my platform. That's part of what I talk about. I market myself as like the Christian nationalist because that's what I am. It's what I believe in. I love God. I love my nation. I love my family. One of the things. And one thing I don't like is Israel. So if you don't like Israel, get you one of these, right? There's nothing more nationalist than this right here. That is a sick shirt. You can get them at the rightwing.com. That's with a W, WRIGHT. I mean, check it out. This is the front. I also have them where on the front it says, the different slogans. We have a bunch of hats, mugs, all kinds of stuff. You may saw them in my mug on here. Definitely go get that. That's one of the few ways that I have where you can support me, and it's not expensive. You get a shirt out of it. It's not just sending me money. You get a high quality shirt. I work out in it. I love them. I wear several of them. Hoodies, all kinds of stuff. I'm Jarrod Wright. This is the Wright Wing. Make sure you hit the follow, subscribe button, like, because I put all of my effort into these videos for you. Because I appreciate you. I love y'all. Become a Christian nationalist. What else can you say?